Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about the Heroes Heretics Stateside Heavenhill 11-year-old, an independent bottling from a very well-known American whiskey distillery. It's American whiskey as opposed to a bourbon, and I'll explain why in a bit. But first, before I tell you what it tastes like, let me give you a bit of information about Heavenhill itself. Originally named the Old Heavenhill Springs Distillery, Heavenhill was founded shortly after the repeal of Prohibition in 1935 in Bardstown, Kentucky, by a group of investors including a distiller, Joseph L. Beam, first cousin of Jim Beam, and the Shapira family, of which descendants still own the company today. The flagship brands are Evan Williams and Elijah Craig, but over the last 2 decades the company has expanded its portfolio to distribute gin, world whiskies, vodka, cognac, liqueurs and more. On November 7, 1996, the production plant was almost completely destroyed by fire. For the next few years, nearby producers such as Brown-Forman and Jim Beam aided Heavenhill with production and bottling until the Bernheim Distillery was purchased from Diageo in 1999. The stateside bottling of Heavenhill by Heroes Heretics is an American whiskey which spent 8 years maturing in virgin oak casks in America before being transported and spending a further 3 years maturation in Scotland. The mashbill is 80% corn, 8% rye and 12% malted barley, but due to the maturation period in Scotland, this cannot be classified as a bourbon. There were 314 bottles in the outturn and it was bottled at 51% ABV. So, let me give you an indication of what it tastes like because I have a little bit of a sample here. So this is not a bourbon, as I mentioned previously, because it has spent 3 years maturing in Scotland, which I thought was quite unusual. So Heavenhill, really highly regarded, but you tend not to find independent bottlings of Heavenhill, unusually. You know, they are such a massive kind of like portfolio of spirits. And such big brands in terms of Evan Williams and Elijah Craig and all of this lot, that they don't really need to have any independent bottlers out there. You know, they don't really need to be selling casks or, you know, shipping casks off. So I do wonder sort of whether this cask was intended for something else. The reason it was over in Scotland was it was actually going to be used for something else, and the guys and girls, I'm assuming, Heroes and Heretics, ended up kind of like finding the cask, getting hold of it and bottling it themselves. This is one of the things about independent bottling is, you know, you sometimes don't really know what happened to the cask. You know, it could have been bought by a group, it could have been sort of earmarked for a particular bottling and a company went bust, or it was kind of like lost, or it was sat in a warehouse. And, you know, there are literally casks out there that are completely unrecorded, nobody knows where they are, and somebody goes through a warehouse somewhere and goes, oh, what's that? Oh, well, it's from here, this distillery, for example. Nobody really knows who it is, and you end up finding a cask that's an absolute belter. So that's why this isn't a bourbon. That is why this is an American whiskey. It could have been called a bourbon. You know, it's over 50% corn. It's been matured in a virgin oak, but it's spent some time outside America maturing, and therefore, nope, can't call it bourbon. So, bottled at 51%, 314 bottles. So on the nose, you've got straight away a lovely kind of intense vanilla note to that. There's a lovely kind of like cinnamon and nutmeg sweet spice aroma in there. You know, there's a little bit of a Christmas cake. Now, it's 51%, but there is a slight sharpness of alcohol. And to be honest, like blind on the nose, I would have thought maybe a little bit higher. It's got that slight fieriness to, you know, higher proof American whiskies and bourbons that tend to be really popular, you know, like 55 plus, that sort of thing. Now, I love bourbon. I love American whiskies. Here's the selection here, and I'd have more if I could. But I tend to err away from, I prefer my bourbons and American whiskies slightly softer, more caramelly, a bit more of a sweeter thing. When you start to get that like chili, dry chili flakes, that really dry sourdough rye, that sort of dryness in American whiskies, I tend to kind of err away from that. That's not really, you know, I appreciate them and I appreciate that people do like them a lot, but I tend to go for the slightly softer style. So getting that balance right is really key for me in terms of having a spiciness to it, but not being kind of like almost like, oh, it just feels like it's a sponge sucking all the liquid out of my mouth. So here's hoping, because on the nose it's got some heat in there, and the danger is that it's going to be, oh, this is a really dry chili spice one. So there is initially a spiciness. There's a good kind of like dry chili flakes on there. but it then softens down really, really nicely. The heat is tempered, and although on the nose there is a definite kind of like, this is a high alcohol, actually on the palate at 51%, I don't really feel the need to be adding any water to it. You might want to add a little drop just to knock it down a little bit, but literally a drop. It does not need a lot of water at all. There's a lovely kind of sultana raisin character to it. Again, that classic vanilla style of like American whiskies and bourbon that threads all the way through. So it starts off a little bit dry, and initially, just for that first millisecond, you might be thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit kind of like, you know, but it softens almost instantly. You get a lovely kind of rich, rounded, light fruitcake style. There is a slightly creamy element to it. There's a touch of like orange oil in there as well. There's like this merest hint of kind of like orange peel, orange oil. It's quite silky as well. There's right in the middle, there's a lovely kind of silky mouthfeel to it. And the finish does carry on for quite a bit. Normally, when you get that chili element, that's what kind of helps the finish along. But actually, this slight oiliness that's there on the palate, that is what's drawing that finish on. You know, a couple of seconds after drying it, waffling away, can still taste it. It's mellowing out really nicely. I think this is fantastic. This is like a brilliantly balanced American whiskey. You get a nice bit of heat to it, but it doesn't overpower. You get nice kind of like caramel, vanilla, fruity overtones, but it's got that spiciness to kind of lift everything up, so it doesn't become quite flat. If it didn't have those higher spicy notes, this would almost be a bit flabby, but it's balanced absolutely brilliantly. The finish carries on going for a while. Drinks, brilliantly neat. Will work really well in an old-fashioned. If I have a little bit left, which I don't think I will, unfortunately, because I need to share this with some customers, but I think this would work really well in an old-fashioned. $74.99 a bottle at the moment on the shelf. Might go on deal at some point, but I do actually think this is a fair price, because you are very, very rarely finding any kind of independent bottlings of Heavenhill, and I'm sure some of that price point is actually them sourcing this and finding it, and they've nailed it. They've absolutely nailed it. There are 314 bottles of it in existence, so there are not a lot of these around at all, and it's superb. It really is kind of like a fantastic advert for what Heavenhill can do. It kind of reminds me, it's a bit like half Evan Williams, half Elijah Craig. Elijah Craig I've always found has been a little bit more rounded than Evan Williams, which has a bit more bite, and this is almost like a halfway point between the two. So if you like Evan Williams, if you like Elijah Craig, particularly the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, which is mind-blowingly good, this is not too dissimilar. You know, if this was at sort of a slightly higher alcohol percentage, I would almost go, this is pretty much Elijah Craig Barrel Proof in a different name. So if you are liking those higher strength Evan Williams, Elijah Craigs, this is really gonna, and you know, works out slightly cheaper than those as well. This is absolutely gonna rock your world. Oh, it's got such a brilliant complexity of flavors. That's not the right term. Words shouldn't be going in that order. There is a complexity of flavors in there, which is brilliant. Is that right? Something like that. Really is complicated. It's one of those great whiskies that I love, that every time you take a sip of it, there is something new. There's something different going on. There's almost like a soft peppermint feel in there on that mouthful. It's one that it just keeps evolving and keeps changing and keeps you interested. It's just great stuff. Absolutely love it. They've done it again. You know, the 48, which I've just reviewed, is great, and the Stateside is, I think, fantastic. As an American whiskey lover who likes, you know, spicy bourbons, not too spicy, soft bourbons, it really does kind of like strike a middle ground without being like, we're middle, we're average. It's, you know, giving you almost all the best bits of American whiskey in one bottle. Superb stuff. Absolutely love it. So it is available. I don't have many bottles, and I don't think there are many bottles left in stock with them either. So if you do want a bottle, I would get in there fairly quickly. Available from our website, www.spiritspecialist.com. We offer nationwide UK delivery, and you can click and collect and pick up from the store. So if you want to come in and have a try of it before you buy it, if I've still got any left, you're more than welcome if I have any of that left as well. So yes, I shall see you at the next video, which is probably going to be another Heroes and Heretics, because I've got 3 on the shelf and I've only done 2 videos. So I'll see you next time. Cheers.